I'm Don Kratzer, or Datadub from the International Figure Research Laboratory. My presentation tonight is going to be about what is Sofubi. Sofubi. Sofubi is a Japanese word that comes from an English word. Sofubi is means soft vinyl. Softobinir, Sofubi. So kind of similar as in Japan, anime, which came from animation. In the West, means Japanese animation, and manga, which means all comics in Japan, means Japanese comics. Sofubi, which means soft veneer, but in the West, Sofubi means soft vinyl toys made in Japan. So what is soft vinyl production? Is basically it's plastisol, which is is like a liquid plastic. It's done in it's a very commercial 20th century mass production process. Here you can see this gentleman. It's he pours the liquid plastic into the mold and has a centrifuge or maybe a pressure tank, and it's pulled out with pliers, and you have this nice plastic toy. And this was a production process that was used for many years. Japan has a long history of toy production, actually. Toys, before the war, they were a very large toy exporter, and then after the war, toys were actually the first industry that was they were allowed to export again after World War II, and they actually started making Jeeps out of the tin cans. But when the soft vinyl production came in the 50s, it really took off. It was a very easy process, and they made like Cupid dolls that I'm sure they're still made today, and they made lots of cute little mascot characters, a lot of banks for saving banks, and for 30 years it was actually a huge part of the Japanese toy production. I actually have probably a presentation on the PechaKucha site on every one of these eras, so if you want to go check it out. But at the end of the 90s, things kind of everything moved to China, and maybe they thought that vinyl production would die, but there was kind of an otaku, that was the beginning of the otaku boom, so companies started making authentic style toys like from their childhood. So it was very authentic, made in Japan, but that seemed to be kind of the denouement, the finish of this kind of 20th century, very hands-on industrial process. So that was sort of the end of Sofubi. Or was it? So, actually, this is a screenshot from the Designer Toy Awards, which is put on by Clutter Magazine. This is from last year. They actually had a category called Best Sofubi. So Sofubi is actually in the lexicon in the West now for toys. And these are toys made using Sofubi, Japanese soft vinyl. And actually, there's currently an explosion of Western artists who are making toys using this 20th century production process. So many. There's a lot of Japanese artists making it as well, but there's just a plethora of different artists making those kinds of figures. And I think people might know that at the beginning of the 21st century, there was sort of a boom in the designer toy movement. I really like this quote by Ivan Vatarian from this book, but he's talking about how the designers have sort of jacked the production process. And how that kind of first took form over here was in early 2000s. There was just a handful of artists who, instead of making toys like were made in the 70s and when they were kids, they actually made their own original kind of characters using this process. And then how did Western artists get in? Well, the Western artists kind of found out about this, and I don't know if any of you know Tim Biskup. He's a very well-known illustrator artist from California. He worked with a Japanese artist, and they kind of made this vinyl toy of one of his figures. So it started becoming a thing in the West as well. And then other artists got invited to maybe just make a head. So actually myself and a couple, Paul Kaiju and L'Amour Supreme, we were invited by a Western artist to design just a head. That's the nice thing about vinyl. soft vinyls, you can actually make parts, and you can put different parts together. So Paul Kaiju, who's a good friend of mine, he started collaborating now with an artist called Blobpuss, and they actually did the sculpting together, where they shared half and half the sculpting part. You can see the finished product. It's this beautiful, creepy, strange doll toy. So what are the real advantages of Sofubi made in Japan is that you can do smaller runs. I mean, this is kind of compared to rotocasting in China or resin at home. You can do really small runs. There's a medium time turnaround. Cost-wise, it's much cheaper than China. Your cost per unit might be higher, but you get a very, very quality product. And the other cool thing about it is that you can get very involved in the process. I mean, you can do the sculpt yourself. To get the mold, you need to make a wax. Some guys now are making their own wax cast. Making the metal mold and pulling the vinyl is still done at a factory, but then when you get the final mold, you can still then get your own toy and paint it. I'm going to make a map on my website, which is figlab.com. I'm going to make a walking tour from Akihabara to Ueno with about 5 locations where you can check out different Sofubi places where you can see vintage Sofubi, or you can see all the way from vintage to current Sofubi. It'll probably take about 2 hours to walk through the whole thing. Also, if you want to find out any more about or see any more of my toy presentations, this is my page on the PechaKucha.org website. I have about 8 presentations talking about different toys and things, different parts of the toy experience. So please check it out. Thank you very much.